I'm going to start. Okay, we are now live on YouTube, but not in the channel previously advertised.
Okay, well, let's just put the link in.
So I'm putting the link everywhere. Hang on.
So they can move over to where it's actually broadcast.
Okay, we are now live on YouTube, but not in the channel previously advertised.
Okay, well, let's just put the link in.
So I am putting the link everywhere. Yes, just give me a second. Right, let's get this show on the road. I do apologize for the technical issues that we have been having. And we are going to start taking questions. So let me see, who do we have and who would like to ask us a question? So I'm just going to, if you could raise your hand if you would like to ask a question live, and I'm just going to bring you on as a panelist to do this. So give me a moment now then. I do believe that we have, right, okay. So I understand that Mark Weeder has a question, which he would like to ask us. And I am now going to put you live on screen, Mark, so I hope you're ready. Okay, I'm now promoting you to a panelist if you would like to ask your question. Hopefully that worked. Okay, Mark, if you could unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Wow, lots of buttons to push.
Great. Okay, we have some success at last. Welcome, Mark. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Okay. I missed the first webinar, but I've been looking at the videos that were posted afterwards, and it looks pretty impressive. My concern is that it looks like Stephen had run through this beforehand and knew exactly what he was going to type into the chat box. I'd like to know if there is an undo mechanism for, you know, this it wasn't really what I meant to type in there. Try again. You know, the first pancake is never the best.
Sure.
And I think in terms of encouraging experimentation, especially for folks who are new to the environment, I think it'd be really helpful to have, okay, someone wants me to speak louder. Let me get closer to the microphone here.
Sure.
It'd be useful to be able to undo the last thing that you typed in, or maybe the whole thing. I was trying to figure out how I would do something like that, and it seemed like it'd be very complicated.
Sure.
I would have something like Git on the back end.
So
anyway, I'm wondering if thought has been given to how you undo what you've just done.
would you like to take that, James, because you've been working on the sharp end of how things are working?
Yeah, so I've been working on the AI layout stuff. I showed a demo in the last webinar. So as for being able to undo anything that the AI has done, obviously it's not always going to output exactly what you've got envisioned in your mind. Either we will be able to implement a preview feature, so you'll be able to see what you are going to get before you actually go ahead with it, or we will be able to, as you say, have an undo feature that will revert you back to before you use the command. we still need to decide exactly which of the two, or maybe we do both. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's something we can fairly easily work into Xavvi.
I think in the designs, the idea is that you get a kind of preview page that comes up and it just shows you essentially what you've asked. So a bit like doing a Google search where you maybe have to try 2 or 3 different ways of searching. Here, it's perfectly reasonable to want to do it 2 or 3 different times until you get the layout that you want. So you do that and then you choose to use it. I don't know, Mark, I mean, obviously you've been looking at the sort of undo, redo mechanism.
Yeah, so I don't think there's nothing to worry about there, Mark. So the goal is that actually we'll have much better undo redo of changes to the stack and the environment. So one part of this is actually motivated by the cloud nature of like online editing, rather than perhaps obviously it's important for users as well in terms of building things, be able to undo whatever you've just done. But because like the Xavvi web IDE is obviously going to have to transmit its data up to the cloud and take it back down again, we want to try and minimize that. So what we're hoping to aim for is that when you will be able to kind of basically have save snapshots of changes between things. So like the AI action thing might save a snapshot, it'll do its thing, and you'll be able to roll back to the previous snapshot, essentially. And that's similar to things that we've talked about, the AI-driven message box, where you'll be able to ask it to do something, and it might initially, until you've got it well trained, do some things you didn't intend. So it's quite important for that as well, that you can save. Like if you're asking it to please change the color of all my buttons to red, for example, you might not have meant all the buttons, or it may, until we've got it working perfectly, it might decide that buttons are fields or something else. So yeah, we're planning to put in quite a fine-grained undo and redo to enable that. Again, that's both motivated from the IDE interaction point of view and make it easier to edit stuff, but it's also motivated by making the way the editing online works as efficiently as possible.
Well, that seems comprehensive. Did that answer your question, Mark? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think so. Would that go for things like, oh, I make all my buttons red. Oops, that's not what I meant. Make all my buttons blue. No, that's not it either. I'll make this one blue. So trial and error.
Yeah, should cover that, definitely. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. And now I'm going to demote you again. It wasn't anything you said, it's just that we can't have too many people on the screen at once. There we go.
Bye, Mark.
Okay. That should have done that. Okay, great. Gosh, questions are coming thick and fast. If you can put your questions into the Q&A, folks, if you can find the Q&A along the bottom of your screen, put them in there, otherwise they're going to get drowned. And so just try and put them into the Q&A so we can come to them later. All right. So I'm going to ask a question on behalf of someone who can't be here today. There's been quite a lot of chat on the forums, and we wanted to try and answer all the questions if we could. So here's one. Is AI overhyped? Could it turn out to just be a flash in the pan? And I'm going to ask Kevin to answer that one.
That's a great question. I mean, I think with any new technology, there's always a chance that it could be overhyped. And I think if AI technologies all stopped making progress and stopped going any further from where they are today, then I think that there's a pretty real chance that they would be, or that they are overhyped. But I think the chances of that actually happening are pretty slim. These technologies are only going to get better. Our understanding of how to integrate them into our apps is going to get better. And then you look at things like the sheer volume of the number of people that have picked up this new technology, and you also look at how useful it is. Like, I'm finding these technologies useful in a number of different contexts day to day. So, it's always possible for a new technology to be overhyped. And do I think that that's going to be the case? Do I think that it's going to be a flash in the pan? I mean, it's possible, but I don't think that that's the case at all. In fact, I'm reasonably confident that this is another major game changer where technology is going to move forward.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I can't see it going away anytime soon. What do you think, Stephen?
Same answer, really. I think of course it could be, but I honestly don't think so. Nothing really more to add there.
Yeah, I think it's just going to snowball. I mean, the internet didn't go away, did it? It just got bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. So let us move on to Paul. Paul Dupuy, you have a question. Let me bring you on to panelist. So if you're ready, here we go. Are you going to pop up any second now? Come on. Paul, why are you not promoting? Where are you? Okay.
Do you want to give us another quick question in the
I
meantime?
think so, yes. I think we may actually have lost Paul Dupuy. I think he may be having technical issues.
No worries, we can come back to him.
We'll get him again. We'll get him again. Jackie, what about Jackie? Let us promote Jackie. Jacqueline Landman Guy, and anybody, if anybody doesn't know who she is, I'm going to try you. Let's see if you will promote to panelist. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Well, you can turn on your microphone and your camera. Oh, we got you both now. You see,
Well, you can have a
the
debate.
wonders of technology. Okay, I'm going to take you in order. So,
Well, my video isn't on, but can you hear me?
we
Yes.
can hear you. Yes.
All right. If you go on the internet and look around, you see there are hundreds and hundreds of programming languages that say they're now implementing AI and they can code for you. And I would like to know how live code is going to differentiate themselves from all these other languages that you could join.
It's a great question. Stephen, I know you had quite a lot of thoughts about this. Would you like to take that one?
I've got some. I know Kevin's got quite a bit as well, but I'll kick it off. So I think you're definitely right in the sense that all the no-code tools out there are and will be adopting AI to make their offerings better. And I think largely we will have a lot of the same feature. But I think the biggest way that Xavi, I think, that differentiates itself comes back to the whole live code versus JavaScript versus Python debate. I think sort of where other tools will be spitting out code in languages that are difficult for that technically savvy but non-programmer to understand, Xavi will be kind of spitting out code which is clean live code scripts that the user can definitely understand. And I think that kind of remains our biggest differentiator. You put in a request in English and you get a response back in English. But I know Kevin's got quite a lot to add to that, so I'll pass over to Kevin.
Yeah, so I think, if we sort of think about the history of live code, you had to learn the language to be able to do anything. And so that was a huge commitment in terms of the time and energy that you needed to put in before you could even be sure that learning that language had any value. If you're a professional coder and you studied something else, you're more likely just to use that. And if you're not a professional coder, you might have given it a go, but it was quite a tough sell. So in a way, up until sort of pre-AI days, the language was almost like a little bit of a barrier, and it was also something that made live code very sticky. So if you did get to the point where you got to that tipping point, then you wouldn't be able to imagine creating apps or something else. You get really productive. There's nothing really like it. But you take those two things together and you have a very low conversion rate for new customers because you have quite a barrier for the language, and then you have very high retention rates because people actually love it when they get there. So our no code platform flips all of that on its head, and it kind of makes our language the big differentiator, I think. And so it kind of goes from being a barrier to being a core strength and a unique selling point. So if you think about it, other platforms that create code, imagine that they're AI and they're creating code for you. You won't be able to understand the code that's been produced unless you're a professional programmer. There's also an awful lot more code that has to get generated by these tools. So there's a lot more potential for mistakes. So if you're not a professional programmer and you get back 2 pages of code that's written in JavaScript, for example, and imagine that it's even as high as 80% accurate, which the AIs are not yet, then you're going to get stuck, very, very quickly indeed. And there's an awful lot more people out there who are not professional coders who want to create apps than there are coders, because the demand for apps is very, very high. So live code inherently needs a lot less code. So instead of, those 2 pages of code, in that hypothetical example, you might get back to a few sentences. And we're also using another layer between the code generation and the AI, which is our actions editor. And so there's an element there which allows us to make sure that the AI is coming back and generating code that is correct, because it's something that's originally been generated and vetted by us, essentially. And from there, you can learn from step by step. So, the coding assistants we produce will be really good and able to edit scripts. So kind of positioning it as the no-code platform with AI, but without the limits. And the other big differentiator is that with a lot of the other platforms out there, if you get to a certain point and then you hit a wall, if it's a no-code platform that isn't outputting any code, then you may not be able to go past that wall. And there are a lot of ways that wall may come and affect your app. You might not be able to build a native app. You might not be able to do online-offline sync. You might not be able to incorporate a native library, write your own server component, create your own script widgets. There's a long list of things that a lot of the other no-code platforms out there just don't do or don't support. And probably you can do all of those things. It's just and with the AI, it becomes a much more gradual step of learning. So you get supported all the way through. So we're really pushing, the angle. The marketing is really going to be talking about the risk when you're choosing a no-code platform of adopting a platform where it might not do something that you need it to do in future. And this is something that we see with a lot of other no-code platforms. People build their app, they get so far down the line, and then they hit some sort of inherent limit. But if you look at the technology stack in Xavvi and LiveCode, which obviously interoperate with it, everything from the new script widgets and the customization capabilities through to that ability to go and compile right down to machine code, you have a very, very flexible platform. So it's AI, it's no code, but it's without the limits. And it takes the language, which has been the weakness in conversion, but the strength in all other areas, and actually makes it a massive selling point in a way that it never has been before.
You'll need to tell everybody that.
Oh, we will. Yes. We will.
Okay.
We've got some great marketing campaigns getting planned around all of that right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Is that a reasonable answer?
I think so, yeah. As long as you get the word out, yeah.
Good. Thanks for that. Great question.
Harley says hi, that's who you heard. Okay.
Heather, you're speaking, but you're on mute.
Yes, classic, absolutely classic. I was very politely demoting Jackie, but now she's gone. Okay.
So
Paul, yes, go for it.
I have a question. I'm going to ask the question of the panelists first. And then I have a tiny bit of hot off the press context at the end of it while you're considering the question. So my question is essentially, how important is it that you think people should build AI into their commercial or non-commercial apps? And what industries you think should go there quicker versus those that might not need it? And then the hot off the press context is we make a tool to do qualitative research or context analysis, analyzing unstructured documents. And we started trying to it's all built in LiveCode. We started trying to incorporate AI about 2 to 3 weeks ago, thinking, ooh, we'll be on the leading edge of this trend once we saw how powerful it was in our particular field. And it blew my mind when I actually data. And then literally last night, one of our major competitors sent out a tweet that said they're just about to release an early beta of AI in their product.
Yeah.
So that's how fast it's happening in my niche industry. And it's faster than I anticipated.
Yeah.
So what do you think industries will lead in the AI use and which maybe less so?
Yeah, I love the question, and I guess there's kind of 2 parts to my answer. The first is that there's there is an awful lot of hype right now. There is a lot of marketing going on. Everybody is jumping on this bandwagon as quickly as possible. And so, if you're a vendor, then you need to think very carefully about not being left behind and being part of that whilst that that hype and that message is happening. I think that's one side of it. But in terms of which apps or which industries, or when to include AI in your product, I could come back and I could list all kinds of things that have been done with AI, the generative language models, the large language models, the image editing and all the rest of it. But I think it's simpler than that. It's essentially, when you're designing an app, the way that we think about it, certainly the way that we thought about it for Xavvi, is what aspects of the app experience would be better if it was possible for the user to describe to the app what they want in natural language, as opposed to going through all of the steps to produce the output manually. So if you think about the different places in Xavvi, and I'm just using that as an example because I know you're obviously doing something completely different, the ability to describe a layout will in many cases be faster than the use of all of the individual layout tools. If it's a reasonably describable screen, there are hundreds, thousands of permutations of those, but it's probably quicker to describe the screen that you want and then to have it all neatly laid out by an AI, rather than have to work out which widgets on the tools palette do I need to use, where am I going to drag all of those things, how am I going to space them all together, and so on. So there's definitely a benefit there. The same, when we're generating actions, again, you can go through the UI and you can click and you can find the menus and you can choose all of the various different things that you want it to do. But if you could just tell the computer what you want to do, and then it can work out what actions you actually meant as a result of that, then again, you have a better experience. So I don't know, the apps that you're building or the apps for different, industries obviously vary. But the question we're asking is just that. It's, well, where is it better in my user experience for that user not to have to do a manual task, but just to be able to explain in English? Stephen, I don't know if you've got anything that you would add to that.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I think thinking about what apps do and don't need it, I don't necessarily know it's as clear cut as that. I think it's definitely a case by case basis. I mean, I think lots of apps don't need it, but I think most apps would benefit from having it. And I think what will probably happen is, over time, and the way everybody implements AI into their apps, I think user expectations will change a little bit, specifically in things like asking for something and getting something back. So I think if your app's not doing those things, then I think you may be getting left behind a little bit. But I think it should be a case of, well, it definitely shouldn't be a case of implementing it for the sake of implementing it. I think it's, how can we deliver something that adds value to our users, or something that makes the app's purpose better? And I actually, just listening to your question, I think that would be a really interesting blog post for us to do, is like pick 10 different apps in 10 different industries and that don't yet use AI, and have a stab at how AI could improve those apps. And I think that would maybe be really useful for everybody to see. It would be really useful for me to write, or for us to write. So that's maybe something that we'll put on the list and get out there.
I think you were right the first time, Stephen. It'll be interesting for you to write.
Yeah,
So
probably.
got
Yes.
your name all over it. Did that answer your question, Paul? Are you?
Yeah, and I admit I was kind of a skeptic in its app. I could see from tests I did with ChatGPT how useful it is in coding potentially, and then when you did Xavi, you vastly broadened my perspective on how it could be applied to application development. I still think where you have a mouse up handler and you can type in, how do I make my button blue? And it says, do you want this, set the background color to blue, is going to save me ridiculous amounts of time. But we finally did the same test in our space, where we looked at a particular time-intensive part of the qualitative research cycle and discovered that AI could reduce that by tens to hundreds of hours for our average customer. And that immediately made the value proposition. And that's that time reduction of the models doing large portions of the work for you, not all of it, as you said, but enough that it advances. So you're doing the last 20% instead of the first 80% of a task. So it was a game changer in my particular company to see this, to say we have to get on board. And then last night I saw the tweet and said, well, now we really got to get on board, or our competition's just going to do it, whether it's hype or not. They're going to be the ones that are promoting it, and people will turn to them instead of us. So thank you.
Well, at least they're following you. So yeah, well done.
Yes, that's great. Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I am now going to demote you and see who else we can bring forward. So just one moment. And here we go. Okay. Don't you love technology? Okay. I'm going to assume that is going to work in a minute. And I'm going to see who has another question. So I believe.
Should we take some of the text questions, Tara? Just mix them in and then come back to a couple more panelists, because there's loads of them building up.
I know they're building up like crazy, and there's more coming in from YouTube as well. We're not going to get through them all again.
We'll do our best. Let's motor forward.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top then and do a couple of texts. So Stephen Goldberg, up to now, as I understand it, if one didn't want to go to the extra effort of creating their live code app for iOS or Android, you could still create a built application, put it up on the internet for download to the user's computer. There was no way, though, for the user to run the app directly from the internet. With the introduction of AI in live code, will this situation change so that the user can now directly run the app from the internet wherever they may be without needing their personal computer at hand? If so, this would be a significant impetus for developers to develop it in live code.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a straightforward yes. It's one word answer.
Yep, good.
Not only that, Stephen, but you'd be able to deploy your app that you've built just with a single click. So
and just to add as well, it's like there's the whole responsive layout stuff, which you can read a little bit about on the site, which means not only is it going to work on your browser, but when your user kind of loads it in their browser on their phone, then it'll adapt to the different screen sizes, which will be made much easier in Xavvi. Okay, so Tom Glod is essentially asking, I think, same question. Well, how will a beginner user correct the errors that the AI makes? Actually, this is a slightly different question. Especially code snippets it provides, where it makes up functions and syntax that don't exist. So how will a novice user know when the AI is wrong?
Because the first experience with the AI, Tom, is not having it produce functions. It won't be writing code in that way. So to try and explain this, above all of the code that you produce, there's a new layer that we're building, which is the actions layer. And so the actions layer are a sort of high level way of describing things that you might want the app to do, like to go to another screen, or to send an email, or to print, or to add a record to the cloud database, or whatever it is. And so that actions interface is built by us, and underneath that we have written code for all of the actions, and you can string them together in any way you like, and you can have if then, and all of that kind of stuff that you need. But it makes the challenge of getting the AI to produce accurate code a lot easier, because we're not asking it to write a whole handler from scratch and make sure that it gets every single line of that handler correct. All we're asking it to do is map the question that you've asked of it to the list of actions, so that it then produces a set of actions. And of course, those actions are producing code that we've written. So we're not really relying on the AI to kind of invent code from scratch. Now, at the next level, of course, we will have the AI in the script editor, so we'll be able to have support for as Paul was saying a moment ago, having it suggest things when you're writing, and select a handler and have it edit it and rewrite it and all the rest of it. And that's just one level up. But the point is that we get people into coding very, very gradually, and the first experience with the AI and Xavvi should be flawless from that perspective.
Okay, great. I am now going to, I believe Richmond has a question he would like to ask us. Richmond Mathewson, and I'm going to promote him to panelist. Hopefully he's ready for this. Hopefully it's going to work. And here it is. Now you need to turn on your microphone and your camera if you can, Richmond.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you? Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see me?
No, we can't see you.
Well,
We'd
that's
like to see you.
yes, I know that's very odd because the start asked. I'm a bit goofy when it comes to the subject. Start video. Oh,
There you go.
Success.
Hello, welcome. You have a
hello.
question.
I have one or two. Actually, I'm going to be a real pain in the bum just for a change and ask about 3 different questions.
Well,
The first question is, why do you keep using this no code phrase around the place when you're not going to get very far with no code? Why don't you describe this thing as a sort of steroidal system for getting started much more quickly? But I mean, nobody, unless they're just doing the thing that goes hello, is going to write anything that's half worth its salt, just on the basis of typing stuff into the system. It's going to have to be tweaked and, you know, mess around with a bit afterwards. So almost everybody who is using your system will have to have at least, you know, elementary knowledge of underlying live code, won't they?
That's a really good question. Stephen, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really trying to understand sort of what no code means. But I think to just go back to one of your points you raised there is that you'll not kind of be able to do anything worth its salt without writing a line of code. I don't necessarily know I completely agree with that. There's lots of apps that have been written out there with, or they've been created out there with, that are kind of got a lot of funding and they're doing very well, but they've chosen a no-code tool to build those apps. And I think that's with with kind of widgets and actions and data binding, you can do quite a lot. But I think to understand, I think we need to try and understand what no-code means. So if you look up a number of tools, and I think I've seen you posted something about the hundreds of no-code tools that are out there,
Yes,
in the forums. There's lots of tools labeling themselves as no-code, but if you look closely, they're certainly not all the same.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they're definitely not. If I try to generalize these tools, and I probably split them into 3 categories. There's tools that are labeling themselves as no code that are for a very specific purpose, such as let's say they're designed for building custom forms, and those tools have all of the things that they need to build great custom forms without a single line of code. That user will never have to write a line of code in order to build those custom forms. But the limitation there is as soon as they want to build something that's kind of not a custom form, then they're stuck. The second category that I think that exists is the more general no-code app building tool where the user's not limited to the type of app that they build. And these tools have got things like widgets and actions and data binding. And you can actually build some quite sophisticated things, but by kind of putting together some actions on certain objects. But those tools don't have any way to extend. There's no extensibility built in. So as soon as that user reaches a limit where they want to complete their app to make it do more than what that tool offers, then again, they're stuck. Then you've got the third category, which does fit into no code. And I think this is maybe where the one that, or where the confusion maybe comes from, is this category is exactly the same as the previous category, where you can build kind of whatever you want. You can extend it with, you can build anything you want, but you can extend it with code. But they are still labeled as no code. There's some, I completely understand there is still confusion there.
Well, no, you see, I have a small school full of teenagers who are all, you know, getting themselves very excited in all sorts of funny ways about AI. And, you know, they're talking about how, you know, all you've got to do is sort of sit in front of a computer and talk to it, and it will, you know, it's not, you know, the mountain will come to Muhammad, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a complete I think it's a complete misunderstanding, and I think it should be made, I think it should be made clear to end users of your system that you can only go so far without some level of knowledge. You know, the idea that you could.
And I think it will be. I think I think just going back to that third category that exists where people can extend it with other languages, they can extend it with JavaScript and Python, but I guess the limit there is the knowledge of the language. But our goal with Xavvi is to remove the need, and we will make this perfectly clear, I think, as we kind of put together all the messaging, remove the need to write code where possible. Xavvi is going to offer the same level of no-code experience as the main competitors in the sense that you can build beautiful UI, bind it to data, use actions to control what your app does. And the more widgets that we add, the more API connectors that we add, the more actions that we add, that will increase the number of apps that can be built without writing a single line of code. But when that user needs to do more, they need to do something that's not covered by the no-code side of the tool. Then what Xavvi's doing is they're not putting them into like JavaScript or Python or saying that they can't go any further like the other categories that I mentioned. We're putting them into the live code language, where along the way, as they've been adding actions, we've been adding clean English script each time an action is added, which gives them the opportunity to learn and understand. And we're adding all sorts of AI support to make that kind of language much easier to use and to give them the best opportunity to succeed with. So like, in my opinion, I think once we have Xavvi, and we absolutely need Xavvi to get there, it is the live code language that makes this the best kind of no code app building offering that exists. So that does fit into the no code sphere, or the no code market, but it definitely is no code without limits. There is an extensibility. I think there'll be lots of apps that you'll be able to get 100% of the way, but there'll be a ton of apps that you can't. But even if it gets you 80% of the way, and you're kind of the last 20% where you want to do something custom, you're doing that in live code. And I think that's the sort of combination that makes our offering, in my opinion, the best one that's going to exist out there. I don't know if you've got anything to say on that, Kevin.
Yeah,
No, I think that's a really good answer. But Richmond, have you got a follow up? Does that answer your question?
Well, yes, yes, and no. But then isn't that the case with? I mean, because, and this is not your fault. It's because AI is, what, 3 months old, and nobody really. I mean, it's just like about. I mean, I remember we arrived in America in January 1993, and I bought a computer in February, and I discovered something called the internet and something called email. Now that's just bang when it appeared. It took me an awful long time to work out its strengths and how useful it was. And of course, as I was learning, everybody else was learning, and the internet became something which was now, I think, is quite different from what it was in 1993.
Yeah.
So I mean, after all, one of the things which I have mentioned on the forums was a master's degree, which used live code to try to develop a front end, and the front end where teachers particularly wouldn't have to know a blind thing about any programming at all. And I don't know. It's possible, I suppose, AI might get to that stage where somebody can just sit in front of a computer with a microphone, and that's it.
Yeah, I think it's quite a way away from that. I think it's this intermediate level of knowledge that we need that really, is why we're, really excited. And I think that's,
it is. I mean, undoubtedly, what you're doing and what other people are doing is very exciting. The thing that I think is important is that people who are not involved in it, like you, need to be aware of the stage you're at and not to expect too much.
Yeah, of course.
Because you could end up with an awful lot of people reacting negatively when they don't get, it's like spoiled children getting too much, not getting enough because they expect too much. So I think there need to be what in linguistics are called hedges. This can take you so far, but and I think there is a danger of overhyping it, and because it's overhyped, it gives people ridiculous expectations, and that can end up being problematic.
Yeah, I think we've got to work very hard on the messaging. I
We do,
definitely,
indeed, yeah.
you want to get that just right.
No, I mean, you know, if I'm going to be nasty, which is, you know, I'm quite good at, you at LiveCode have been pretty awful at your advertising for an awful long time. So now might be the time to, you know, sort things out a wee bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another question coming up actually on that subject. So
Yeah.
we'll drill into that when we get to it. But I do have a few comments I'd definitely like to say about that. But I think we need to.
I think
Yeah.
we need to move on because we're the questions.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Thanks so much.
everybody.
Thanks for your question.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay. Right. Hopefully that will work. There we go. Yep, that worked that time, and I'm not on mute. Good. Let's take a few more texts. In fact, let's take a couple of questions from YouTube, because they have been coming in as well whilst we were here. So let me see what we've got. Question from Strider on YouTube. Hi, everyone. Thanks for hosting this AMA. How does Xavvi work with regards to the IDE? Is it online only, or will there be a desktop IDE for it?
Okay, so initially in the first version, it will be online only. It's all cloud connected. There will subsequently be a desktop experience for it, but that won't be in the first version.
Right. And let's take another one from YouTube from HR Cap. We have a lot invested in our project built in LiveCode. Could you speak briefly on what this means for the future of LiveCode? Will we be forced to move over to Xavvi, or will Xavvi supplement LiveCode and run alongside each other?
They will supplement LiveCode and run alongside each other. One of our values is to be a long-term dependable partner. We've proven that over more than 2 decades, and we continue to support LiveCode throughout all of us, and Xavvi is indeed built on LiveCode.
And from Bully the Pirate, will Xavvi allow us to use backend services such as Xano or Bank Endless, etc.?
I'll give that one to Michael.
Hi, yes, so I'm not super familiar with Xano, and I think it's back endless. But yeah, we will be implementing various back-end connectors. I can't say that we'll directly connect to those 2 services, but yeah, there is the option to, if you want, because you're just writing LiveCode apps, you can connect to those backends directly yourself. There's no limitation there. So if you do wish to roll out your own backend, you're not forced to use what Xavvi offers you out of the box.
Great, thank you. Okay.
So just to add to that, so just having a quick look at Xano, that seems to be a no-code back-end builder. So one part of Xavvi, which is going to be included as well, there's going to be something called Cloud Actions. So you'll be able to write your own back-end code easily in the Xavvi front end that gets uploaded and runs on the server. So that might actually not make it necessary to connect to things like Xano or whatever else. But yeah, you'll be able to connect to any online service and do REST APIs and stuff like that as well.
Great. Okay. I'm going to try for one more live question, if we can. I know it's amazing how we're getting through the time again, but I do believe that Richard Gaskin has a question he would like to ask. So I'm going to promote Richard to panelist now, if you're ready, Richard. And let's hope that comes up. Should maybe, oh, there we are, there he comes. And if you want to turn on your microphone, with any luck, your camera. Not hearing anything, not seeing anything, Richard.
I've unmuted.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
So now you have my face.
There you are.
Now you have my voice. I hope you have it. Confirmation.
Oh,
Nice to see you.
Okay.
All right. Good to see you
What
guys.
was your
Nice to
question?
see you.
And every time we do something online, there's one detail that I feel needs to be addressed before we get into the business, and that is the business of saying, Heather, thank you, because I see the emails back and forth, and I know what it takes to organize this. And you're dealing with third-party systems that have their own flakiness, and all the scheduling, and people who have their all the stuff. Thank you for putting this together. It's always a lot of work. My question was, as you know, developer focused, because that's what I do. And because the one thing everyone here has in common is we love live code scripting. So it's nice to see, other products added to the line, LCFM, Xavvi, things like that. But for a lot of us, live code scripting is freaking awesome. We love that, more of that. So my question is, what is the live code IDE marketing plan look like for the next 12 months, those parts that can be shared? And do you see much of in the way of growth opportunities for consulting developer evangelists?
Yeah, that's a good question, Richard. So, as we kind of said already in this webinar, we're very proud of live code. We absolutely plan to continue supporting it. And in terms of the marketing that we've been doing and are doing for it, we do things like social media marketing. We have a lot of our organic traffic. So my answer is kind of in two parts. So first of all, in terms of what we're actually planning to do for live code as an independent product, there's not a huge amount planned in the next 12 months. So it's not as bad news as it sounds. And the reason really is that the conversion rate for somebody trying live code to the point where they become a customer isn't really at the level where it's possible for us to invest in that, in that the cost of actually acquiring that traffic has to be lower, and it doesn't really matter how that traffic's acquired, whether that's media outreach or going to shows or working with influencers or just buying the traffic. So, in the early days of live code, it was a lot cheaper to buy that kind of traffic. And we did a lot of that actually, and we've got customers from those days that are still with us to this day. But these days it's a crowded space and there's a lot of competition, and it makes it a lot harder to do things like that. So the second part of the answer really is that Xavvi is new, and it's a fresh platform, and it represents our entire experience from the last 20 years of trying to succeed in converting new customers, in popularizing the platform. And so, I'm very highly confident that the conversion rate for that will be much higher. It will be possible for us to go back to what we did in the early days of live code and buy lots more traffic, and you should see our marketing spend on that go through the roof. So from a community perspective and from a services perspective, both live code and Xavvi are going to be on the same website. Not everybody who's going to land on livecode.com is going to want Xavvi. Some of them are going to want live code. Some of them are going to go from Xavvi to live code at some point as their product gets bigger, richer, deeper, has to go beyond what's in the box. So there will be a benefit there, I think, from the upsell. There will be a benefit from the cross-sell. And not to mention that at the end of the day, Xavvi is essentially live code under the hood. It's producing live code scripts. So there will be a need for services in that space in exactly the same way. All of your existing live code skills can be used in Xavvi to sell services in exactly the same way as you do now. Stephen, I don't know if you had any thoughts that you wanted to add onto that.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the success of Xavvi definitely creates a fantastic opportunity for the expert consultants in multiple ways, really. So Xavvi itself is going to allow the users to get much further in their kind of app building journey, and in turn be motivated to keep going. So when that user needs to kind of do something, they've got a choice. They can try and do it themselves, or they can hire one of our Xavvi live code experts. And I see that as a big opportunity for growth there, like really having a good consultant space. The larger pool of users, or the larger the pool of users that we can bring in with the success of Xavvi, then the bigger opportunity there is in that kind of third-party market. I think maybe another opportunity that is going to exist, and maybe that there's definitely going to be a demand for, is for creating widgets and templates and custom actions. I think as Xavvi grows, I definitely see the need to have a large kind of third-party marketplace. And the people that are already quite advanced in the live code ecosystem, I think, are probably well placed to take advantage of those opportunities. But absolutely, we need to make Xavvi success in order for all of the consultants in this space to kind of take advantage of that and create those opportunities. Hopefully that's useful.
Thank you. I appreciate the perspective.
Did you have any follow-up on that? Are you happy with that answer?
Oh, Chester, you know me. Do I have follow-up?
Okay, right, bye.
Do we have time? No, we do not.
We don't have very long left.
Understood. No, there are many other questions. Let's share some time.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay, all right. Thank you
Bye for
very
your
much.
question.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, I think we're just going to keep going with the questions. Probably we'll run over a bit, maybe
Yeah.
until past.
Try and get a few
But
more.
if you have to go in 5 minutes, then the session is being recorded, so you can come back and get your answers if you need them.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's
absolutely.
really important to try to get through as many of these as we can.
Yes. Okay, so shall I go back? I'll go back to the Q&A and start working down it, shall we?
Absolutely.
So Sean Cole is asking, following on from Mark, that was Mark Weeder earlier, can you undo something from much further back? How clean does the code end up once it has been removed, although being codeless? Does it do a good job of cleaning up?
Yeah, so the way to think about it, it's not undoing what it was, it's going back to a previous state. So that would be the way we want to do it. And well, if I had my way, it managed to work well enough, and it should go back a pretty, we do want to, as kind of a essentially infinite undo if we can. There are some limitations there because the edit run live thing. But yeah, so if you get the IA or you do something in the IDE, you should be able to press Control Z or Command Z and go back to exactly what it was before you did that. So that's kind of what we want to aim for. So even if the AI action you asked it to do makes 1,000 changes to your card or your objects or whatever, they should all go back to exactly as they were before. Otherwise, it's not really undo. So
Sounds great to me. Okay. I don't quite understand that question.
Yeah, Stephen, maybe if you Stephen Goldberg, if you maybe edit that question, we'll try and get to it.
Yeah, we'll try and come back to it because I don't understand what you're asking. Christopher Searson, does Xavi create manually editable code when the AI writes? Oops, where'd it go? Hang on. Oh, I see. When the AI writes it, is that the intended workflow? As Xavi writes the base code and then tweaks on manual.
Yes, so it does create manually editable code. So whether you're using it in the actions editor or you're using it directly in the script editor, either way, it's going to output live code script, and then you can do whatever you want to it. And of course, it's not just about writing code, it's also about making suggestions whilst you're in the script editor and writing code to make corrections and suggestions if you've forgotten a piece of syntax or something like that.
Richmond, I don't fully understand what you're asking here. Is a platform independent interface needs to be designed that requires almost no syntactic knowledge and no computer literacy. Well,
if there's a question, please come back with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a question. We do need a good UI. So Xavi extensions for Live Code 10 individual subscription holders, will they be available in the future?
Me and Gordon about the live code subscriptions, and will there be any other options versus the business pledge option? So the extensions are available or will be available after launch, Ian, at the higher tier, at the business tier. That's the level that they'll be included, because that's the level that Xavi includes access to the desktop IDE for live code and the ability to deploy onto mobile. But the cheapest way to get them by far is to pledge in the campaign, because not only do you get them now, but you'll also be able to keep them even if you move your Xavi subscription down to the individual level later.
Okay, Ron Toledo, is the AI component of Xavi based upon the AI tech acquired by LiveCode a few years back? Is the AI component of Xavi based on open source codes, or is it licensed?
Okay, so Ron, we're using other people's AI backends. Essentially, the whole space has moved forward in a huge way, and the large language models that are needed to make something like this work are things that are used. And in terms of the cost for that, there's a concept of a cloud work unit that we have when you buy a particular level of cloud licensing from us, and usage of the AI just comes out of those work units. So that's how we essentially meter the cost.
Okay, so Stephen Goldberg's saying, I'm the author of LiveCode Lite, computer programming made ridiculously simple, and would like to see an expansion of the usefulness of LiveCode through its direct running off the internet. Well, yes, that's what you're going to see. So,
Positive
good.
comment.
Okay.
Andre Dutin, I suppose that the AI generated code will not be infallible. Will you include a reminder to users that the code provided may have pits in it? Yes.
Like a jar of cherry jam. Yes.
We will. As I've kind of said before, the initial experience that you're going to have is going to be building actions, which then build code. So that will be very accurate. In the script editor, of course, it's going to be as accurate as these platforms are. There are ways that we can improve on what comes out of the box, but yeah, it's not going to be infallible.
Okay, so Sandro is asking basically how, as an OpenAI customer, do you have clauses that protect you from increases in costs, which would also protect your customers from large price increases?
Yeah, so I mean, Sandro, well, first of all, the history of these things is that the cost has come down. The cost of the older APIs and OpenAI are significantly less expensive than the newer ones, and I think that's a trend that's likely to continue. There are also competitors in this space. I'm not going to commit us to necessarily using OpenAI all the way through, but in terms of protecting us from costs, as I say, it's metered in the cloud unit concept.
Okay, Clarence Martin would like to know our timeline for presumably the shipping Xavvi. Do you have a milestone list?
Okay, so we covered this in the last webinar,
Yeah.
and essentially we're aiming to get something into your hands to start testing in relatively short order. I mean, we're quite a long way through the process of building this, so there should be something. I don't like giving exact timelines because it always goes wrong. But
no, and it makes me very cross as well.
But in quarter four is the aim for the very first MVP of the platform shipping.
Okay, so maybe this is one for Mark or James. Can one invoke AI while editing a script? That is, to use AI as a scripting helper.
Yes, I'll take that. So yeah, I think that that is the plan. Yes, we're looking at a couple of things there. So one would be quite excited to get to work is where you can type in a rough line of live code script and it kind of auto corrects it to something more accurate. I think Paul Dupuy mentioned that in he's got, I think there's a video, we've got an example of that. And other ways, we've been experimenting a bit with like ChatGPT-4, and it's very, very good, for example, at describing code, even live code script. So we're also looking to have a more direct connection with the script editor into ChatGPT, where, for example, you'll be able to select a block of code and say, please explain what this does, and things like that. So yeah, so it's definitely going to be quite an advantage. We're also looking at autocomplete and improving that as well. So yeah, there's going to be quite a lot of scripting support in the script editor using AI in Xavvi.
Okay. So Jose is saying we're basically working on a predefined 100% proof working prompts to use with OpenAI to get the right widget code. So yeah, we've pre-written the code.
Yeah, I think the way to put it is we're developing a system where we use a large language model, e.g. ChatGPT, to actually make sure we get high quality results from arbitrary queries that you might put into it. Obviously, when I say arbitrary queries, I mean arbitrary queries that make sense in the concept of writing apps or writing code. But yeah.
Okay, David Simpson's asking, I think this is a Michael one. How would we handle multi-tenancy in an app? For instance, if we deployed a multi-tenant solution to MySQL, we could instantly create a new separate database on the same server for each customer. Therefore, each customer has their unique data store.
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's a couple of options. If you're talking about effectively white labeling an app, developing an app, and then deploying a different version for each of your customers, that may be something you might need to discuss with us so we can provide the same app but with multiple backends. But another feature that we're going to offer is user management directly within Xavvi, so you can deploy login boxes, create users, and then each individual user of your app will have their own visible data store. So it's effectively like a unique user backend for that app, and that may do what you're requiring there. But if you're talking about an entirely separate, isolated backend for each customer, that may be something that you need to discuss with us directly to offer you those services.
Sure. Okay. Don O'Brien, where are you getting the training sets for the AI? Is this, the IDE code base and other applications?
So in terms of the training set, we're using the OpenAI to the level that it's already been trained. Obviously, for things like the actions editor and the layout generator, we're doing our own, creating our own layer on top of that to make that work. In terms of the kind of ongoing training, you know, we've obviously had a conversation about that surrounding privacy and what people are comfortable sharing or not sharing. You'll have a choice when you're using the Xavvi IDE. You will be able to choose to participate in the experience program or not. We would encourage you to participate if you're willing to do so, because it lets us feed back training data and use it to improve things. But you won't have to if you're working on a really sensitive application and you feel uncomfortable about the idea that your code editing queries, even if they are anonymized, shouldn't be used, then we'll absolutely allow that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Andre Detienne is asking, I think this is a Mark one. Is it possible to generate AI algorithms a la ChatGPT in live code script?
So does that mean writing something like ChatGPT in live code script? If that's what you mean, I'm sure it's possible.
I think it maybe means using ChatGPT in the app, maybe.
Yeah, so we're going to, I think this is something we'll be doing more on, because as we're going down the AI journey, we've obviously learned a lot. So there will be an OpenAI connector. There'll be a library, a script library added to live code and in Xavvi to allow you to connect easily to ChatGPT, and obviously you can add other services they appear. Yeah, so I think what we might be looking to doing is over the next few months or so is we can start talking about how we're using AI to do the stuff we're doing to help you guys figure out how you can add it to your apps. The thing is that the actually using OpenAI itself in particular is really simple in terms of a really simple REST API. It's like a single call you can make to ask it to complete something or continue a conversation. But then what's actually more difficult and the hard part is actually working out how to use it to actually get the results you need. And that's where all our time is being spent on the AI stuff. But yeah, we can provide some resources and stuff over time. And there said there'll be a basic library to allow you to directly interoperate with OpenAI.
Yeah,
quite soon.
I think that's probably what he means. I mean, we're probably not going
to although it would be interesting to write a large language model in live code script. I'm not sure. Since people have already done that, I think we'll be focusing on actually just using what already exists for the time being. But hey,
yes, for now.
For now.
Okay. Ron Toledo, will live code evolve to fully cloud-based, or will it remain a thick client tool for the foreseeable future? There seems a lot of parallels between live code and Xavvi, as one might expect.
Oh, absolutely, continue to be a thick client tool, as you put it there. You have to remember that we are positioning this as a no-code platform without limits. Well, one of the limits in many other no-code platforms is the fact that they always have to be cloud-based and online. The idea of being offline and having online-offline sync, or being able to build a native app, these are all essential things that we're certainly not going to be moving away from.
Andrew Might, how are you handling debugging and testing for a user developing an app?
So as far as I'm aware, the debugger will run the same way inside the web IDE. We have been talking about ways of allowing you to easily debug the cloud actions as well.
I think the other thing here, in terms of testing, you'll be able to share your app as well as like publish it and stuff. So it'll make it much easier, for example, if you're working on something, to actually have other people help test it without having to obviously build a standalone and send it to them, because it's all on the web. You could just send them a link to your shared app to have the help get testing involved. And I'm sure there might be other stuff we could do in the future to help get feedback in and stuff like that in that scenario. But yeah, you'll be able to debug and test in much similar ways as you can in the live code IDE at present.
Okay, I've already answered that. Would it be possible to ask, so this is on Andre Detienne again, to ask LCGPT to examine the live code and tell us which lines were generated by itself and which lines were not? I understand ChatGPT can differentiate that sort of things, which helps to find out what lines in a student's essay were actually generated by the student. Who wants to take this one?
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, so I think the thing is, as I said, currently our AI efforts are basically creating this upper layer above like code. So it's kind of, that isn't really an issue. It would be an interesting question actually if they can actually work out how to watermark AI generated scripts just generally. So they know they've got they kind of can watermark kind of essays and things like that. But if you think about it, creative writing and things, it's much easier to inject invisible kind of subtle patterns that you wouldn't notice if you're just reading it, that a computer could. In code, if you tend to it's kind of a bit more dense in terms of what needs to be said. It's like more compact. It'd be hard to see how you might do that unless you have subtle things in the variable names that help it done by ChatGPT.
We might be able to track that though as an educational product feature.
Oh yeah, no, indeed. It'd be interesting to work out if we could do that.
If there was demand for that, it would be interesting.
Yeah. To be fair, there's a simple solution there. We can actually mark the lines of script that were generated by AI and ones which the user has edited. So you can, yes, it can be directly. So
we can do that now, but I mean, as things evolve, I think there's going to come a point where you won't be able to tell.
Yeah.
Anyway, very interesting question. All right, Tim Blayler. Seems like with Xavvi, you're trying to create something that can build the whole app from scratch. However, most demonstrations I've seen of current AI tech seem to be writing a function or two. Would it be more practical to focus on building AI tools to supplement live code instead of a whole new product? If I've misunderstood Xavvi, could you elaborate a bit more on how we would use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tim, it's important not to be fooled by the idea that the AI is the only thing that's new in Xavvi, and therefore you can only produce a simple app that you've built just by defining the sort of AI functions. It is a full live code-like editing experience, but it has a whole bunch of new widgets, new API connectors, a cloud backend, the ability to deploy with a single click, and a number of other things that have been improved about it. So absolutely, you start off in the AI, and if you get to an app that's up to a kind of moderate level of complexity, you might never actually have to go any further. But it's all there. It's a fully fledged app building platform, and at the end of the day, one of the selling points is that you can download the app you built and run it in the live code IDE if you need to go even further and build a native app. So I hope that helps to answer that.
Thank you. Okay, Ron Toledo. Would it be possible to integrate AI into live code as an optional component? Specifically, this function would act as a coder's assistant. As the programmer is coding, she could ask the AI via chat to review the code, look for issues, make suggestions. So this allows the live code programmer to stay in the driver's seat and the AI acts as a co-pilot.
That's exactly what we're doing, Ron. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're doing just that.
Okay, hang on. Yeah, here we go. Brian H. I'm not sure if he's asking us about live code or about Xavvi. I believe a lot of hardcore live code users wish to have widgets or tools that provide a means to integrate AI models or capabilities into their projects, e.g. iOS built-in chip neural network and core ML capabilities. Live code already has considerable capabilities to bootstrap code and auxiliary devices into it. Hence, perhaps it would not be too difficult to make tools that make it easy to plug AI models into projects.
Absolutely. And I mean, we'll be including connectors to OpenAI initially at the box. We may include others as we go forward. Yeah, totally agree with that. We're going to make it very easy for our users to write apps that use these new technologies without having to do any thinking or configuring. Question here from Rama about fine tuning. It'd be great if we could, the AI engine and API under the hood in Xavvi also work with local knowledge. Runners on my hard disk and could answer queries based on local content. Yeah, I think that's really a slightly different product, but it would certainly be something, Rama, that you could build using Xavvi if you wanted to do that. And in fact, that would be quite an exciting project to do. And in terms of the engine that we're going to use, we will be using a number of different tiers of engine depending on which of the various different AI tasks we're adding. But yeah, GPT-4 will be in there amongst the others.
Okay, Jim Lambert. I don't know, maybe James would like to take this one. Crafting a good prompt is critical to getting a good GPT response. How will you help users learn to make good prompts?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hopefully the AI will be simple to use. We'll try and make it as simple to use as possible. It will require probably some kind of details on the beginner users might miss out. But we can include in the tutorials and things like that, give some guidance on that. But overall, I mean, I think the users will be able to test it, see how it goes. And if they're not happy, then they might need to add a bit more detail into their prompts. But yeah, I totally agree. I think prompts are almost a skill when you kind of get to know what kind of details you need to include to get what you're looking for. But yeah, I think we can include that in the tutorials and try and give good examples of what good prompts are. And I think that will help. But hopefully, even kind of basic prompts should at least return something. And there might even be a way to kind of have the AI return a kind of response that says, you know, you need to be a little bit more detailed here. That might be something we can do. But yeah, it's a massive problem.
I think the other thing is just, you know, we'd encourage you to opt into our user experience program if you're willing to, and just tell us, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down if you get back what you're expecting, and when you put something into the prompts, because that will really help us to get that right behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is. There's a lot can be done with good documentation as well, and lots of examples, and yeah. Okay, Craig Newman, LC needs a killer app right away built with AI to draw in a younger crowd and wow an older, perhaps experienced one. Can Xavi do the following? Build a Pong game, and if not, when? The code to do this would be very readable and therefore very attractive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Craig. I think we do need to have some examples that really wow. I don't know the specific answer to the question on build a Pong game. I haven't actually tried that.
I bet Mark and James will be away after this session to go and try it out. Probably. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get there. So Mark Weeder, will we be able to build Xavi technology into our standalone apps?
So if you're talking about being able to use the new widgets, backend, cloud, API connectors, and all the rest of it, then yes, absolutely you will. Yeah.
If you have Martin Coop, this is if you have a live code hosting account, can its services or resources be shared with those of Xavi? For example, Xavi storage equals live code hosting server disk space, cloud work units equivalent on LC.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. Unfortunately, not, Martin. They're completely different platforms. Xavi is cloud-based. It doesn't run on it's a different hosting mechanism, company, location altogether. So I'm afraid there isn't going to be any synchronization between the two.
No, they're just different, I'm afraid. Okay, Sean Cole, is speech to text for creating the actions going to be possible out of the box using either browser OS or proprietary tools? For example, Scotty, hello computer. I can't do the accent, maybe.
Hello computer. That wasn't right either.
Yeah, so I think that's good. I think, to be fair, that's probably quite interesting to add on. I don't think it's kind of orthogonal to the whole AI thing, because essentially, like, all the large language models are text input and text output, and obviously they bolt on things in the front and the back to do the whole kind of, whether they do like speech, doing stuff with images and ChatGPT-4, you throw a photo and it generates a layout or something. So yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing to add, so that you could essentially just talk to your computer. But I think that's kind of a bolt-on thing. And to be fair, like in a browser, like I think most like Chrome and things, you can click a button, you've got dictate to your computer, and it will put the stuff into the text box you speak.
Work, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, watch this space, Sean.
Not quite Star Trek yet, but maybe soon.
And for our next trip, the quarter. Anyway, moving on. Claudio Ferres. Hi, everyone. I have a question related with software development stages. When Xavi makes an app, is there a way to version it? Considering that Xavi builds an app, is it possible to make a second, a third version of the app?
Yeah, we have been talking about that. There's obviously going to have to be ways of storing different versions. It comes back to that same question that you're asking about undo and redo. And it also relates to the concept that in Xavvi, you will be able to have multiple people log in and work on your app. At the moment, or in the first version, that's just going to be at the sort of stack level. So if you've got multiple stacks, you could have one person that can run each stack, but obviously we'll work to make that more fine-grained in the future.
And I can just add a little bit to that. You'll be able to create multiple deployments of an app. So if you want to have different versions, V1, V2, V3, there's nothing limiting you creating multiple deployments, but each deployment will take up disk space. So if you've got 10 deployments, that'll be 10 times the size of just one single deployment.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Okay. Paul Dupuy has a good question here. I know that Xavi has a units billing model for so many resources per unit time a month. Have you decided how you will handle an account that has a surge in usage and runs into X units, runs into the units per month limit? Will they get a warning at a certain threshold? Will there be a certain amount of overdraft allowed? Will there be something else?
Yeah, so we have talked about that and thought about that. There certainly will be a warning when you get close to your limits, and it's just going to be a choice. Do you want us to stop your app from working when you hit the limit, or do you want us to bill your card for the overage and be responsible for that? It's entirely up to you how you want us to handle that.
Okay. So Calver Bazargan, you talked about how live code is more readable, so great for beginners, but does the user friendliness of live code also allow for better coding by AI machines?
We don't know for sure yet, Kava. We think so because it's having to produce considerably less code, and therefore there's a lot less scope for it to get things wrong. But I don't know whether anybody else has anything to add to that.
Yeah, so I think there's certainly, I think, the live code script. So if you think about ChatGPT-3, the one you generally get when you go to OpenAI, if we played with that, the thing to remember is that you can ask it to generate code, you can ask it to generate JavaScript. Python is the thing they focus most on in ChatGPT-3, and you can ask it to generate live code script. Now, if you think about the amount of JavaScript and Python that it's been trained on, because the amount of code in open source projects on the internet that it will have sucked up and looked at and all that kind of thing, compared to the amount of accessible live code script is there, it's quite impressive how well ChatGPT-3 or 3.5 Turbo, the current one, actually can generate live code scripts. There does seem to be, because of its more English-like, natural language-like structure, does seem to be slightly better. But over time, I suspect the difference is that the modules get bigger and they kind of get better, then the differences will go away. I think in terms of us and what we're doing, that Xavvi, we are very much trying to tailor kind of what we're building in the components and in the actions and everything else to make sure that it is does allow for better use by AI. It allows you to generate better layouts and better code and stuff by using AI to do so.
Great. I'm just going to pop over to YouTube again because a good question has come in from Jose Garza. Will a beta release be available to business pledgers to start learning ahead of time?
Yes, well ahead. In fact, every pledger will get access to the beta releases, not too long after the end of the campaign.
Mm-hmm. Just as soon as we can get them into your hands.
We can get them out, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Tom Shell. AI is forcing the rapid iteration of business models, products, services, and strategy everywhere. It is indeed. My question is focused on how live code and the team dedicated to Xavvi will work fundamentally differently in order to keep up with the industry and the daily pace of innovation coming from private enterprise corporations and the education open source communities. How will your business model and operational model change to meet this new reality?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. Things are moving really fast right now. Fortunately, all of us at Live Code really love the pace of change. It's really interesting and exciting. You can see our response essentially to the large change and the introduction of large language models back in November is this campaign, and it's changing course. We were on course to build a Xavvi-like product. We've been working on it for a long time, but the integration of AI and making that a central theme is us essentially pivoting to keep up and hopefully actually be on the cutting edge in terms of the innovation. I think we've come up with quite a few really nice ideas that are going to make this a very special and very unique product.
Great. Tom Shell says, by the way, I love your direction. Very easy decision to continue to invest in the company and your vision. So thank you.
Great. And in case I forget to say it later, there are only 8 days left in the campaign. So please do go and back the campaign. And now is definitely the time.
Yes.
And also I mentioned that there's a new pledge tier. So you can now buy a 3-year individual license. It's in the pledges. We added that today.
Lloyd Merrithew is asking, will there be a Xavvi app store or marketplace?
Yes, there will.
Ron Toledo, Xavvi is shaping up to be an incredible platform, the result of amazing teamwork. What suggestions do you have for development teams out in the world who are trying to develop solutions that are just as important to them and their companies?
That's a very general question, Ron. I mean, I would say that it's really important, and it kind of goes back to the points that have been made earlier, to stay focused on your customers. You know, where can you improve something in a way that is meaningful, that is useful, that is not just about jumping on the bandwagon of something new, but is actually about producing something that gives a better experience to your users. If you keep asking those questions and you keep thinking about the user experience and you keep encouraging your team to talk about that, then I think that's a great way to do that. Stephen, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add.
No, I think similar. Really, I just think really try to know what your users' friction points are. I think you as the kind of developer of the tool probably accept a bunch of things. But if you can really try and understand what those friction points are from the very first moment all the way through, and take steps to remove them, then that just keeps your user, I guess, happy to continue further into your tool, which gives you all sorts of more likely chances of keeping that person as a user.
Yeah, I think it's really important just to stay close to your potential customers and keep talking to them as well throughout the whole process.
Okay. Let's just take another one from YouTube quickly. Another from Jose Garza. Do we need to buy our own tokens from OpenAI with our own API account, or will Xavvi provide them?
Okay, so when you're doing the code editing, the layout generation, the actions, and all of the things in the IDE to build your app, we provide all of that. So you won't even have to think about that. That's all something that happens behind the scenes and is the concept of work units. If you want to use AI in your app that you are delivering to your customers, you'll need your own OpenAI account with your own tokens. And it'll just be a question of going into the settings screen in Xavvi and just choosing to plug in your API key. And that's kind of it.
I should say, so we are going to make it as simple as that. So obviously we'll make as part of what we're doing with like the connects and things, we'll make sure that anything that has to be staying on a server and it's never downloaded locally will stay there. So you won't have, like at the moment, for example, if you want to use OpenAI correctly in a client app, you need to create a server service and have your API key stored on your server and vector everything through a REST API that you've written. We'll make all that kind of automatic in Xavvi, so you won't have to do that for that kind of thing.
Okay. We're rapidly running out of time, but let's see if we can plow on through quickly. There's another one on YouTube from Andy Piddock. Hi, I've tried ChatGPT generating live code script, and it does a fairly good job, but it's not 100% accurate. How does Xavvi increase this accuracy? Have you built a live code LLM for training ChatGPT?
I think we've kind of covered that question in that the first tier is for it to generate actions. But then beyond that, it is about whether or not you want to participate in the experience program and allow us to continue to feed back into the models. GPT-4 is much better at live code script than 3.5. That's another thing that's just worth saying.
Okay, great. Richmond is saying cheating and plagiarism are going to be a major concern in the future. Well, yes, yes, so that's a statement.
Unfortunately, it's from our pay grade to resolve that sort of issue. Yeah.
Ralph, the layout's always a time sink. I would use the LLC to do the layout via AI. I have many libraries for the back end. So make me a card with 3 buttons from left to right, about 33% down. The scrolling read-only field centered below the buttons. Field needs to scroll to mobile. Please do. I think he's trying to say that we need good UI layouts.
Yeah. I think that's kind of is halfway between the UI builder that was James already showed off, and also this idea of our AI accelerated or AI assisted message box, where you'll be able to say something like create a card with 3 buttons from left to right about 30% down, and then ask it to do something else. The idea being that it can actually understand some context about what you're doing stuff to. So for example, also say like change all my buttons to have a red background color, or translate all labels to French and stuff like that. So so we definitely want to get some stuff like that working, just to make it easier, so you're not having to clicking and dragging stuff. Sometimes it's much easier to express stuff in like an easy English phrase than it is to actually manually do it. Or even write a live code script line to do it as well, which obviously I do a lot in my IDE rather than actually clicking and dragging.
Sure. Okay, and so there's one last question here. Would there be the option for offline storage of versions from which?
Yes, Richmond, you will be able to download your content manually from Xavvi and save it to your hard drive. I don't see any reason why that won't be possible.
Oh, I'm going to slip one last one in from YouTube from Emmanuel Can. Will there be tutorials on how to use Xavi's features, especially the backend and cloud NoSQL feature?
Yes, there will be. Absolutely, there will be. We're completely overhauling the documentation as part of this project. It's a massive piece, and we're pouring energy into that at the moment.
Okay, we really are out of time. I just want to throw a spanner in the works. And the very, very last question I would like to ask, will AI make coders redundant?
Oh, yeah, that was the forums, wasn't it?
It was from the forums, and I think I'd like to address it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that AI will turn a lot more people into coders than ever before. It's going to make people who are entry-level coders significantly more capable and powerful, particularly when combined with a platform like Xavvi that's producing English. It's also going to make professional coders a lot more productive. So you're going to be able to create larger, richer solutions for your company or for your customers at lower cost. We've seen some of the other tools, like the GitHub tools, for example, being quoted as boosting productivity by 50%. But in terms of us, in terms of coders being made redundant, there's always going to be, for many years to come, there's going to be a real benefit in knowing code. Certainly is for a very, very long time. And I think it's really important to remember that in the market, there are 100 times as many apps needed as there are professional developers to create them. So, we can create the product, increase productivity, we can make it easier to produce apps. It probably just means that a lot more apps are going to get created. And obviously, you can't predict the very far-flung future, but for the next few years anyway, I think that's where I see it. Okay, we have to wrap this up. And if you want to see all of this come to life, folks, please go over and pledge. Absolutely, yeah. We want to build Xavvi. We want to make it great. So yeah. Okay. Thank you all so much. I know we ran over again, but what can you do? All great questions. Yeah, no, thank you so much for the
thank you, everyone.
questions. It's been
Thanks,
great.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.